Welcome, listeners, to our first episode or round one recap for 2023. We've changed up a little bit to how we've gone in the past. We've split it up a little bit differently, so I guess you'll find out when you listen in this episode. So to kick things off, we've continued the trend with our Versus series, which was a bit of a hit in pre-season. And we'll split it up in half. And the second half is we're going to go through some overrated, underrated topics with Nathan and Jonas. But just real quickly, how did you go, Jonas, this week?
Yeah, pretty subpar. I think I scored like 1960, and there were a few picks, which I assume a fair few people are also trying to sort out at the moment. So it doesn't help when you've got people getting injured and concussed and whatnot. So that really holds back the scoring, but hopefully a bit of normality resumes in round two. How about yourself?
Yeah, similar score to you, 1978 or whatever it was, which placed me in the top 40k. But obviously with Jones and Laird and all those guys bombing out, it's a hard one to gauge if that's a one hit wonder kind of thing or if that's consistently going to move on. But I guess we'll move on quickly to our discussion points for this episode. So the first one that will cause a bit of debate is obviously the Tom Stewart injury, with those owners being very unfortunate with him scoring a 14. But obviously replacements are in order for him to, or for owners to find a replacement. The two players that obviously stood out on the weekend, Nick Dacos and Hayden Young, obviously both quite young, both had issues in the pre-season. Dacos with the tag and Young with his just average scoring. Out of these two, who would you pick? Obviously both fired on the weekend, but who would you go with these two?
Probably Dacos. Young scored well, but a lot of the Fremantle defenders seemed to score very solidly because St Kilda's forward line was non-existent. The question remains, though, how often is Dacos going to get tagged and can he still be a top six? Like, he'll have games like this where the team give him no recognition of his talents and let him roam three, but he will get some heavy attention at points of the year. So for me, I'm still going Dacos, but you're still picking him and the same risks still linger. So it's one to be careful about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat as you. I think as a Saints fan, obviously watched the game on Sunday, and Young, as much as he was impressive, I mean, we had a big problem moving the ball forward and just getting intercepted constantly. Young was on the back end of that alongside with Ryan and Cox, and they went massive as well. So it's hard to gauge what his potential is against an actual side that can kick inside 50 properly. Dacos is also one that is probably got more consistency in his game just because of his role, but also has the issue with tags coming his way if teams decide to go that way. But I guess, McGuinness was one that obviously ran with him in the preseason game and did quite well, but no other team's really been trying to do so. I think just because they realise how, as a second-year player, he just demands the ball, which is really impressive. But yeah, moving on now to two other players with the issues in the midfield. Obviously, you've got Laird, which we'll speak about later with Nathan's overrated, underrated segment. But yeah, obviously Laird is a potential trade-out target if you want to go that route. But the big one, is, as you're aware as an owner, Jonas, is Josh Kelly's concussion, which has caused a few headaches. And obviously Whitfield, if you got in the midfield, got knocked out as well. Or was injured. But what are your thoughts of bringing one of these two in? Both of them went pretty big on the weekend. DeGoey being I think 480k, and LDU being that 500 bracket, so both cheaper or around the mark. What are your thoughts on these two? Obviously had both huge games. One so against a pretty average West Coast side, and DeGoey against a very strong Geelong side. But what are your thoughts on those two players? And is it worth bringing any of those two in?
Yeah, it's a very reactionary sort of decision because I don't think either of these are top 8 midfielders. Having said that, they both looked very impressive. I'd be looking more towards DeGoey because he has the propensity to get forward DPP and he's about 70k cheaper. And you can do a lot with that 70,000. You can upgrade a rookie to a Sheasel, for instance. So I'd be looking at someone like a DeGoey over an LDU, but I'd prefer to be looking at players in the 350,000 range that people may have missed, for instance, a Warple or a Setterfield or a Horn Francis. That's where I'd be looking, but you can go and do a lot worse than pick one of these two.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're right. I mean, I'm in this bracket where, because if I use a trade boost, I'm able to mitigate or negate issues surrounding the Bruin and Jones situations. So I'm looking at not particularly one of these two, potentially De Goey maybe. LDU is a hard one because, yeah, West Coast are very average side and he just dominated, so it's hard to gauge how he's going to go against a really good side. But, I mean, he's got a huge upside with his potential. He, had a pretty stock standard game, went absolutely berserk. To go, he's one that obviously is not going to kick 3 goals every day. But he just seems, I don't know if you agree with this, Nathan, but he just seems to have stepped up a level. Was always a pretty clean midfielder. But the fact he's able to get his 25 odd disposals and a couple goals per game just shows how important he is to that Collingwood side.
Yeah, for sure. The fact he kicked 3 goals suggests that he does spend some time up forward.
Yeah.
And if he can get that forward eligibility and you've got him before he's hitting 570,000 or something, then that's a huge plus, yeah. But if he doesn't get that forward eligibility, his scoring will improve a bit, but I don't think it's enough to get top 8 mid. And at 470k, I wouldn't be spending a trade to do that unless you're confident in him still scoring well and also spending some time forward.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Moving forward to another 2 midfielders that will be a discussion point later in the episode with regard to mid prices and premiums, because obviously the premiums did pretty terrible this round. But 2 in particular did quite well in the mid price option is Setterfield and Warple. We'll have our write-ups on Patreon pretty soon. Later on tonight, actually. But Setterfield and Warple, both impressed. Obviously, Warple close, both basically a ton. Warple predominantly played mid, so did Setterfield as basically a third midfielder and a big body midfielder. Both impressed, had their 25 and 30 disposals respectively, or 29 disposals. What are your thoughts on these two, and is it worthwhile almost taking a massive gamble and trading a premium out or an underperforming premium for one of these two, just on the basis that if they consistently keep their role and have their scoring ticking along, is it worthwhile bringing one of these two?
Yeah, so it's a tough one. I think I'm tempted to go elsewhere and let them play for one more week and then decide which one's the better pick, because at the moment, Setterfield, whilst he's got that job security now, you'd think, and that position locked up in the midfield for the short term, he only had the 3 contested possessions, so that's a bit of a concern. But you can look at it the other way and go, well, he's scoring well and he's not getting much of the inside ball.
Yeah.
Whereas with Warple, he couldn't get to 100 with 29 touches and 7 clearances. So I'm not sure what to really make of that. So that's why I'm interested to see how Warple goes against better midfield opposition and see if he can still rack up the ball before committing to him. But if I had to pick one at the moment, it would still be Warple, given he's very cheap in comparison to Setterfield. And yeah, you can do a lot with 45,000. But Setterfield, I think, is a bit more of a premium trade. If you've got no other problems other than maybe a lead or something, and you want to get an elevated mid-pricer and you think you can maintain a 100 average for a little while, then I'd go there. But otherwise, I'd be looking at Warple.
Yeah, I think Warple, is a more consistency-based wise player in the CBAs compared to Setterfield. I don't mind Setterfield as a left field option. He just seems to score well, and it's kind of what Essendon as a big body midfielder as a third mid, because you've got Parrish and Merritt, who are both, good in their own right, but I think they lack that big body midfielder, which Stringer was meant to be as an explosive midfielder forward, but just wasn't that. Unfortunately, I think Warple's a bit more consistent around the CBAs, that's for sure. And I think we'll just score naturally because of his role. But moving on now, before we wrap it up, we've got one more left in the forwards. But yeah, 2 ruckmen that went absolutely berserk on the weekend. And I think none of us had either of them, which was a bit unfortunate. Witts and Gawn. Obviously, it's a bit difficult when you've got two other premium ruckmans in their positions, but is it something that we should be concerned about considering how well both of these guys did? Or is it one that we just hope that the likes of your Darcys and Marshalls bounce back in round 2?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I wanted Wits, but I couldn't afford him.
Yeah,
He scored well, but he wasn't really playing against a good ruck opponent, so I wouldn't read too much into the score. And with Gorn, I'm a bit more concerned about Gorn. Concerned as in not owning him. Um, I just hope as a non-owner, Grundy starts sort of eating into his ruck minutes a bit more.
yeah,
But the problem with Gorn remains he's still now a bit injury prone. He's a year older. They could rest him forward entirely for one game because Grundy's pretty fit and healthy.
yeah,
So for me, if I had to pick one, I'd be going Wits
yeah.
still for the same reason, but I wouldn't be trading Darcy or Marshall to get to them because they played each other. Tough matchup. Darcy has Nadanui, I mean not Nadanui, Bailey Williams in round 3,
Yeah,
hopefully, and could go like 200
yeah.
and really just alleviate any concerns. So no, I'd be like maybe looking at one of these to post some DPP changes. But
Yeah.
for now, I wouldn't. They're a bigger fish to fry than looking at Wits and Gorn.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think you'd be in a really good position if you were looking to bring one of these two in for another premium ruckman. But I think Gorn is a bigger upside. I think Grundy's really benefited him. He's less forced to play up forward and really dominating around the ground and more behind the ball is what he was so good at beforehand. But finally, before we wrap this segment up, Jason or Francis, I've included Wood again. I know Jones is going to kill me, but I've got a legitimate reason, so we'll get to that in a minute. I can expand on my reasoning on him. But this is more for the Tanner Bruin situation. If you're looking to trade out a Bruin and you're lacking the cash to go up to a Cogs or whatever, and you need a direct swap, these are probably your two closest points unless you want to go cheaper. But obviously, both had excellent games for their own reasons. Who would you go? I probably know who you're going to go for, Jonas, but give me a justification in picking him.
Well, Wood scored only a 108 and needed 2 clutch time final quarter goals to get there. So to me, I hate the pick. But Horn Francis, he's one I'm considering now because he's heavily in that CBA rotation, a bit more than I thought he would. And he looks to actually be winning a lot of the ball. As you can see there, 25 touches. So one to consider as potentially a forward keeper, but if not,
Yeah.
at least a good short-term money maker. So to me, it's more of a question of do I bring him in or a Warple at this stage, with plans of bringing perhaps the second one in the week later. But at this stage, I'm liking the idea of bringing Horn Francis in and then seeing how Warple goes against a good midfield.
Yeah.
And also how Setterfield goes, because I'll probably be picking one but not both. Whereas Wood, there's still too many unknowns. Plus I don't know how much more expensive, but he's in the 400s, right?
Yeah. I keep forgetting he's an only midfielder, but I'm pretty sure. Let me have a quick check. Give me 2 seconds.
Whereas, yeah, Horn Francis is 350k. So if you're saving money as well, that's the way I'd be going. So to me, yes, Horn Francis. But I'm curious to see how Tom can
Justify.
even try and persuade me into Wood.
Yeah. Obviously, one's DP, one's not, which obviously doesn't help. But Horn Francis is the DPP option. If you're looking, obviously Jonas has explained his Jason Horn Francis pitch, but yeah, Mason Wood. The only reason I'll be looking at him is just because of his consistent scoring since the back end of last year. As I mentioned in one of the previous preseason episodes, he's basically taken on that role of a winger that just works hard, and he's more the interceptor winger. So what I mean by that is he's looking to block that offensive play down the wing and essentially cut straight back in and be that attacking goal threat within the attacking 50. And that's where he got those 2 clutch time goals. He's always seems to be bobbing up in the right places at the right time. He naturally almost scores a goal a game kind of player because he's at an awkward height. He's one of our best runners at the club. Obviously, if he was a forward, I'd be much more inclined to do so. But I guess if I've just seen consistency from his game. He doesn't need many disposals to score well, as you can see. Obviously, 2 clutch times goals are going to bump up his scoring, but even without those goals, you'd be looking at a high 80s, 90s score. He's one, obviously, which has his injury concerns, but that's, I think, risk with any player. But he's one that's, I think, under Ross Lyon is really going to flourish in that specific role, just because you look at, if you remember, St Kilda supporters remember Brett Peake or someone like that, who's very consistent winger, has a very specific role and does it well. I think Wood's going to flourish under someone like Ross Lyon, but I guess if you don't want your Setterfields and Warples and you feel that Wood's got better upside in consistency-wise because you've had that small sample size last year, he's someone to consider. But yeah, it's more of a stab in the dark if you're really struggling and want that upper edge for sure. But yeah, Horn Francis, I think, is the way to go forward-wise if you're looking for a straight trade-off with Bruin if you have the extra cash. But before we wrap it up and move on to the segment, our new overrated, underrated segment, I was meant to do this at the start of the episode, but just wanted to give a massive shout out to Stops, who is our Patreon that signed up prior to round 1, which is really appreciative. And we'll have a couple bonus things coming his way with regards to, early access to the videos and personalised one-on-one feedback for his team if he needs so, or he or she, sorry. So, yeah, really appreciative. And if you feel, the need to support us in any way possible so we can keep developing content and keep improving, that'd be really great. But we'll catch you for the overrated and underrated segment.
So we're now going to move on to some other topics. So this sort of always comes up, but 500k mids are better than 600k mids. What do you think about that statement, Jonas?
It has some validity because you're saving a lot of money, and the 500k mids, like your LDUs, did outscore your 600k range midfielders. But having said that, it's been 1 week, so let's just settle down a tiny bit. Gold Coast got thumped by Sydney, so Warner did well. LDU played West Coast, so he had an easy opposition. So I want to see 1 more week's worth of matches before I even consider trading out these 600 and 700k midfielders. But also, it's like a strange situation. You're almost backpedaling without upgrading your team, wasting a trade and making like 100,000, and you're not sure if, say, your LDU can outscore a steal, for instance, for the rest of the year. So for me, it's an overrated statement because we're wasting a trade to trade out a keeper for another semi-keeper, if you like. So yeah, I'll be waiting a week. Very reactionary to be jumping on one player like LDU, who's had a good game, but albeit against a weak West Coast opposition.
Yep, I would go along with that too. I definitely think that's overrated. There we go. Rage trading Roy Laird. I can't even believe that this is a slide, but rage trade, what are we doing here? Are we holding or trading?
If you've got zero problems in the rest of your team and you want to upgrade someone to a mid-pricer, for instance, like a rookie to like a Warple, then I could see some small merit in it, but we know what Laird is capable of, so I want to see 1 more week. If he scores poorly, by all means, go trade him. But he's not going to drop in cash this week, so let's just see how he goes. Chuck maybe the VC on him, and maybe he goes 150. But something's wrong if he goes 100, and you can drop him off then. So,
yeah, I can't even believe this is a slide, to be honest. I hold all the way that they don't grow on trees, these 700k midfielders. So we were speaking off camera actually about the fact that we might even be vice captaining him this week, given that he's playing Richmond. But the other factor I think too with Laird that shouldn't be, I guess, undersold is he played in 40-degree heat. Like, that would have to take some kind of sting out of you, especially as an interstate side travelling to Sydney to play in that searing heat. I'm not surprised, to be honest, that him and Adelaide, to be fair, after quarter time, they ran out of gas. So Yeah, I'm definitely holding him, and I will look forward to seeing him come out and score 150 odd against Richmond, hopefully. So this is another hot topic at the minute. So Liam Jones obviously went off in the first half with a neck injury. Now he has been cleared of a serious one, which is good. Only scored 5 though. So what are we doing this week, Jonas? If he's fit, are we going to keep him or do we have to get rid of him? What are you going to do yourself if you have Liam Jones?
I think I have to get rid of him. He's a tough one though because he showed the ability to score well last week or the week before against North Melbourne, and he's playing St Kilda, and all the Fremantle defenders scored well. So it's a tough decision. Definitely trade him out if he is unavailable this week. But if he is playing, it's a team-by-team basis. If you've got other problems, if you've got Tom Stewart, for instance, you're trading him. If you've got Nat Fyfe, I think you're trading him. The only reason I'd be holding Jones, if you've got a Fyfe, for instance, is the lack of alternatives around his price. The best options, I'd say, are to go down to a McKenna if you don't have him, to go down to a Stocker, for instance, or a Tom Cole. But none of those options, apart from McKenna, scream, pick me. So for that reason, I'd be holding Jones unless there is another player, ideally in the back line, that you really like the look of and want to get. So for me, this is an underrated statement because I will be trading him.
Yeah, I think I will be trading him too, possibly this week. But that's a wait and see. Mid-price madness or Primo's in the guts? Which one here, Jonas?
Well, at the moment, the mid-price madness is working to an extent, but I think if you want, you can't be downgrading premiums like Lachie Neale to mid-prices now and wasting a trade doing that. The only time you'd be doing that is if one of these premiums gets injured, because you're essentially trading the player out to get in a mid-pricer who's going to, in theory, score less, only for you to then spend another trade to bring the same player back in. And for me, I feel like you're spending too much in terms of trades to do such a move, and everything has to work out for that to work. So for me, I'd be sticking with the premiums you have, apart from perhaps the only one I'd make an argument for is a Josh Kelly, because he'll be missing a week, or a Rory Laird because of his poor score. And just at least getting one more week's worth of data, because so many things can change in a week.
Yep, I'm the same too. Primo's all the way. You don't want to be trading out you don't want to be trading out Rory Laird because he scored 50 points and jumping on, say, a Jordan De Goey who scored 130 points. I think you've just got to accept that those 130 points are gone. You're not going to get them. So just trust Laird that he's going to outscore De Goey, which I think in the long term is probably more likely. But I will definitely reap De Goey's 130 as an owner of him, and move on. So before we wrap up the podcast, so this is a segment this year that I think we're going to do whenever we can. So this is my segment where I have a crack at someone who underperformed and basically putting them on notice for our side. So the easy option here is Rory Laird, but I'm actually going to give Laird an out because, as I said, he was playing in 40-degree heat, and I think most players would struggle in 40-degree heat. So the player that I'm actually going to take a pot at this week is from the Western Bulldogs, and his name is Bailey Dale. Now, Bailey, you can't tell me that from 60 inside 50s at Melbourne he only managed 19 disposals and 56 points. So for all your owners out there, you've let them down for week 1. And you need to fix up your kicking efficiency. You only went at 50%. So if we're gonna trust you, Bailey, we need you up in the 80% mark. So little minor clip on Bailey Dale. I'm sure he'll come good, but yeah, we definitely need him to pick up the slack. So anyway, I think that's all we have time for this week. Have you got anything to add, Jonas?
Not really. If you're seeing and VCing anyone, the main options I'd be looking at are Tom Green, led as a VC only, and perhaps like a Sean Darcy. That's where I'd be looking.
Could I possibly go down the Goey against Port Adelaide?
Probably not, because Port Adelaide restricted Brisbane's mids quite effectively last week. So I'd maybe be looking at some of the other options, but I don't know, maybe he'll fire again. He's a superstar.
I'll probably go with Rory Laird, I think, against Richmond. I think that'll be a game where he gets off the chain a bit.
Yeah, agreed. Let's hope so.
But yeah, anyway, that's all we've got time for on this podcast. As always, please keep your eyes on our social media pages, and if you haven't already, please go and subscribe to our Patreon page. I think it's $4 for the base one and $7 for the top one. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. Roundabouts, maybe $3 for the base.
Yeah, so please subscribe to that if you have the time to. It really helps us, get these out to you guys. And obviously, if you're involved in them, you get the perks with the Q&A access if you're in the premium tier, and you get the access to the tipping, which was a bit of a rough start for myself, but we can always look forward to next week. But yeah, anyway, enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you back for round 2.